This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Sunak's election announcement on Wednesday took everybody by surprise. Hours before the announcement was made, Tory MPs were texting journalists saying they didn't think it was going to happen and that they hadn't been told anything about it. Even senior ministers had no idea it was happening. Foreign Secretary David Cameron, for instance, had to suddenly cancel a trip to Albania to make the cabinet meeting before the announcement. And Defence Secretary Grant Shapps similarly had to delay a trip to the Baltics. Now, there were good reasons for Sunak to keep the announcement a surprise until the last minute. As we mentioned in yesterday's video, jumping this on everyone with no prior warning makes things difficult for basically every opposition party. Labour have to hurriedly finish up their manifesto, which could provoke some infighting between the more left-leaning and centrist bits of the party. Reform now don't have enough time to even find the required number of candidates to fight a general election, which is probably the main reason that Nigel Farage has decided not to return to the fold. And the SNP have had no time whatsoever to develop a public profile for their new leader, John Swinney, who's now going straight into a general election only a month or so after becoming party leader. But perhaps the main reason that Sunak had to keep his election plans quiet is that, well, many of his top advisors and most of his MPs apparently don't agree with his decision. This is pretty understandable. The Tories are currently more than 20 points behind in the polls, and many MPs will be anxious about losing their seats and therefore their jobs in a month's time. If he'd forewarned them, he would have triggered another round of furious intra-party fighting, and the majority of MPs who apparently favour an autumn election would have done everything in their power to delay the election. Sunak was presumably hoping that jumping it on them would deny dissenting MPs the time to push back, and instead encourage them to rally around the flag and unite in order to maximise their chances of keeping their seats. But while this might have worked with some MPs, in the past couple of days, we've seen a number of reports suggesting that a handful of rebels are considering trying to oust Rishi Sunak before Parliament is formally dissolved on Thursday, and prevent the election from even happening. According to Sky's Beth Rigby, this group includes at least one minister, probably either the Minister for Common Sense, Esther McVey, or Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Chris Heaton-Harris, who apparently both dissented when Sunak announced it to them in Cabinet on Wednesday evening. So in this video, we're going to have a look at whether Sunak could actually be ousted before the election. Hint, the TLDR for any jittery Tory MPs watching is almost definitely not. But it's a fun constitutional hypothetical either way. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So, to understand how this would work, we need a quick lesson on the British Constitution. Basically, when Sunak says he's calling an election, what he's technically doing is asking the King to dissolve Parliament. In this specific case, on Wednesday, he asked the King to dissolve Parliament next Friday and call new elections for July the 4th. It's convention that the King does what the Prime Minister asks, so the King has agreed, and that's what's going to happen. That is, unless Tory MPs can get rid of Sunak, install a new Prime Minister and get them to ask the King to not do those things, or perhaps just hope that the King interprets Sunak's ousting as a sign that he should reverse his decision. The way this would apparently work, at least in the minds of rebellious Tory MPs, is via the 1922 Committee, which is the club of all Tory backbenchers. Under Tory party rules, MPs can write to Graham Brady, the chair of the 1922 Committee, requesting a confidence vote in the party leader. Only Brady knows for certain how many letters there are, and letter writers are guaranteed anonymity. If at least 15% of backbenchers, so 54 MPs at present, write to Brady, a vote is triggered. But even if this were to happen, there's a good chance that Graham Brady would just silently ignore it until after the election, given only he knows how many letters are in, and as chairman of the 1922 Committee, Brady likely sees his job right now as trying to avoid the party self-destructing. As we saw in the final days of Truss a couple of years ago, the rules on timings of votes are, well, flexible. Understanding that a no-confidence vote in the campaign period would be, to put it bluntly, insane, Brady would likely delay the vote until after the election. But even if Brady were to allow a vote, Sunak would probably win it anyway. Tory MPs may be frustrated in Sunak's decision to call the election, but even his harshest critics know that ousting him now would be not only career suicide, but also likely lead to the total electoral collapse of their party. Anyway, to be clear, this would be an internal vote on whether Sunak can still be the leader of the Conservative Party, not technically whether or not he's Prime Minister, which is just defined as anyone who can command a majority in the House of Commons. Usually, if party leaders lose these votes, they resign as the Prime Minister, because if you don't have the support of the majority of your own MPs, you don't have a majority in the Commons. But that's not always true. Even if a majority of Conservative backbenchers expressed no confidence in Sunak, this would only technically stop him from being leader of the Conservative Party, and he could still refuse to stand down as Prime Minister. The rebels would then have to pursue a vote of no confidence in the government if they wanted to get rid of him, which would require a majority of MPs in the Commons. Again, this is very unlikely, because opposition parties would probably vote that they do have confidence in Sunak, just to avoid him being toppled and thereby allowing the July election to proceed. But even if the opposition parties did stand aside, they'd still have to find another Tory who could command the confidence of most of the party, and subsequently a majority in the Commons, to stop the election. This could just be a stand-in leader, whose only job was to stop the election. But even then, there's no guarantee that the Tories are sufficiently organised to agree on a single candidate. All in all, as you can probably tell from the number of times I've said even if, Sunak isn't going to be ousted anytime soon, and it's both lunacy and a telling indictment of parts of the Conservative Party that anyone's even considering it. When making videos like this, we rely on tons of data analysis to interpret crucial economic data and understand political decisions. But this kind of analysis isn't just crucial for our jobs. As our world becomes more driven by AI and data, your job will likely require more analytical skills too. That's why we've been using Brilliant. Brilliant is the STEM learning platform which can teach you all the skills you'll need in an increasingly digital workplace. They've just introduced a whole collection of new programming and LLM courses, suitable for learners at any level, taking you through everything from learning Python to understanding the importance of training data. And Brilliant isn't just about memorization and lectures. Brilliant teaches you by doing, using active learning techniques to teach you the principles behind otherwise quite complex topics, and ensuring that you actually understand what's going on, with thousands of interactive lessons in maths, data analysis, programming, and AI. All of Brilliant's courses are split into easy-to-digest chunks, meaning you can quickly and easily gain real knowledge in just a few minutes a day, with fun lessons you can do whenever you have time, replacing mindless scrolling on the bus or waiting for coffee with something stimulating and rewarding. To gain access to Brilliant for free for a full 30 days, head to brilliant.org/TLDR. or click the link in the description. That way you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription, and they'll know that you came from us, which really helps us out. Thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video, and thank you for your support.